it's just started raining, so I had to stop what I was doing. What I was doing was planing my fretboard to try and get it nice and flat, and also I needed to make it thinner, it was too thick. I'll show you anyway. So this is what I'm using for my fretboard. It is oak, Tasmanian oak, which is not a good wood for a fretboard, but anyway. So actually here's a piece, here's how it started out. Like this, you can see it's about 12 millimeters thick, which is too thick for a fretboard. Fretboard wants to be about maybe 4.5, well no, about 5 or 6 mils I guess, 4.5 on the sides. So I am going to radius the fretboard, but have a look here and you can see on the end I've obviously taken far too much off this side. But if we go to the other end of the fretboard, so you can probably see here from the side, that it's much higher at this end. So at this end here, it's where this is where I've been starting to plane. I've been starting to plane here and going across the board, going down the board this way. And yeah, I'm not taking much off at the start, but you can see it just gradually, it's not too bad till about halfway here, and then it just dives down. But it's only on this side, so if we look at the other side here, you can see on this side of the board I haven't actually taken anywhere near as much off. So obviously my technique leaves something to be desired, my planing technique. So rather than throwing this away, what I think is the edge, the side here is probably about the height I want it anyway. And I'm going to radius the fretboard to a certain degree, so I'm thinking what I'm going to do is work on this side. I'm going to start planing from this end, and I'm going to try and get this side way down, and the other side I'm going to start trying to get just that back end down. But anyway, it started raining, so I had to bring it all into the shed. I was going to show you this outside, but weather's terrible. So we'll have another go later.
Hello there, it's voiceover me. Welcome to Cheapskate. I'm Cameron, and we're obviously partway through the video. It was really windy, so I didn't want to put you through that, so I'm just going to do voiceover for this part of it. And as you can see here, we've managed now to improve my planing technique somewhat, and actually get a bit of a radius in the board. Just using a 15 here, I actually ended up using a 14-inch radius. So this is one way of getting a radius without using a radius block, if you don't want to get one. I did get a radius block. It turned out to be 14 on one side, 16 on the other. So my original plans at a 15-inch radius, I had to swap it to 14. But you could get whatever radius you want by simply sanding or planing the radius in. If you watch Ben Crow at Crimson Guitars, he can just plane a radius straight in seemingly seconds. I don't know, he's just really good with wood, and I'm fairly new to using a plane. So, but I'm trying to get a roughly radiused now, and then the idea then is to make sure the base of this thing is completely flat. Then we'll get it onto the actual neck before we do the final radiusing with a radius block. A radius sanding block, that is. So as you can see here, the sides are touching, but the middle is you can see through the middle underneath those radius gauges. So that just means that there's not enough of a radius in the board, even though the sides are kind of matching. So, but anyway, I had a bit of a radius. I thought, well, that's good enough for now until we get it on the neck. Now I just want to get rid of basically rough patches and stuff. So I'm just using a sanding sponge with, I think it's 120 grit. Just to get it sort of smooth everywhere, so that once I hit it with the radius block, there won't be any notches or anything in the wood. I will go back to me talking again very soon, and in the video, because the wind, I think we get a little bit less wind. Now, using the luthiers trick, you know, I basically super glued this down with the masking tape, but just showing you that sometimes it's not as easy to get off. But anyway. And this is the, I'll buzz off in a minute, but this is me sanding. Now, because this board was so thin, I started to sand my fingertips, and so I'm just demonstrating it there. So I came up with this idea of actually just using masking tape handles, because the woods are very light and I'm not putting downward pressure, I'm just sliding it across because I just want to get it flat on the bottom before I put it onto the fretboard. This system worked out pretty well. Starting to lose the light, but I want to get this glued up so it can dry overnight so I can work on it tomorrow. So fretboard, I'm going to glue that onto the neck, and then I'll cut it down on the bandsaw to similar size to the neck, and then just sand it back. I'm just thinking, actually, should I put the truss rod in? Even though it's only a test build, I might put it in. I'm going to put the truss rod in. I'm probably going to break this guitar once it's finished and I can get the truss rod out again. But even if I don't break it, I keep it for sentimental reasons or something. Truss rods are pretty cheap, so it's worth putting it in to find out whether I've done something wrong or not. So by putting it in, hopefully I'll find out, and yeah, that'll be good. Alright, so put it in there. I did cut the channel a little deep. So I'm going to use a trick I saw on Crimson Guitars, where he gets a little bit of masking tape like this and just rolls it up and then sticks it down to fill in gaps, so it gets pushed down a little more and stops it rattling as well in the guitar if it gets loose in there. And this one, probably, that's one lesson I will take out of this, is I didn't put this in tight enough. This is just so it doesn't inhibit the glue onto the wood. Just want to just cover the truss rod to stop too much glue getting into the truss rod. Don't really have to have too much tape actually on the wood itself. Oops, that wasn't a very good cut. It'll do. Alright. We're still rolling. Battery hasn't run out yet. Get some glue. Get some glue. Oh, glue everywhere. Not what I really wanted, but anyway. That's why we have paper towel. That's good. Alright. Still rolling, we're still rolling, pretty good. Says nut on there, good. Oh, I'll put the right side on. Yes, I have. I'm an idiot. Because
because I wrote nut on the side that had to be glued down, and I didn't trust myself. Make sure, the most important thing is the fretboard's covering the whole neck. If it's not, it slides off to the side somewhere, that's not good. Okay. I think this is why most people stick the fretboard on before they shape the neck. Stay tuned for our next exciting episode. Well, at least I didn't cut into the neck. That's the main thing. Came pretty close just there, but didn't actually nick it. Yeah. The blade I just readjusted the blade to try and stop it wandering, but it's still terrible. It wanders all over the joint. Okay, so it's not a very nice day today and it started raining out there, so I came in here. This, by the way, you may see videos of people saying they have tiny workshops. Well, they ain't got one as tiny as this. Yep, this is my workshop. It's basically a pallet wide and 3 pallets long, something like that. And there's just, as you can see, there's just stuff everywhere. Anyway, the reason I brought you in here, this is a one of these curved radius blocks for radius sanding. This one is 14 on one side and 16 on the other side. So we're using the masking tape trick. So Crimson Guitars has started off, which is just basically, in this case, I'm just putting masking tape all over the surface. I'm not overlapping the tape, so I've left actually a little gap here because I don't want to overlap the tape because it might make the sandpaper uneven. So I've just got some sandpaper here in a roll, and I'm just going to basically, cut off a piece and put it on. We'll put some super glue along here. I'm just going to put little strips of super glue down the middle. I don't want any super glue to go into the gaps I've got here, because obviously they'd actually glue to the wood then, which won't be good. So I'll just put little thin strips of super glue along each of these three here, and then I'll spray some accelerant onto the paper to make it set quicker, and just rub it down onto this, and that should give us a nice looking sanding board. Alright, so it's stuck down now, as you can see. Quite nicely stuck down, looks good. So I'm living in Melbourne, and we get 4 seasons in one day here, quite commonly. Clouds don't look too good, but we've got bits of blue. Who knows? I mean, you just never know. Anyway, if it clears up a bit, I'll come out and do some more. G'day. I have a couple of issues. As you know, I stuck the fretboard on, and when it was gluing on actually, and subsequently now I can see it off, it hasn't made very good contact, as you can see here on the edge, especially the rear edge. The front up towards the head, it's not too bad. I hope you can see this, enough light. But as we get towards the end, there's like a little bit of a gap here. Now, it may be because I didn't think about it, but when I attached the fretboard, I clamped it in the center. I didn't really put anything on top and spread the load. I put it mainly in the center, and may have caused, because the sides are a little bit thinner, because I've radiused it a little bit, it may have caused the sides to lift up. Either that or it warped. It didn't look warped when I looked at it. I think I remember checking it and it was straight before I put it on. So there's that. So next time I glue a fretboard on, I think I want to make sure that, I have seen videos where people use something that pushes down more on the sides. I think also that most people probably don't do any radiusing until after they've glued it on. So I've had it, if the fretboard was flat when I put it on, I could have just put it on and put like then a piece of timber over the top and clamped that down, and that would have put even pressure over it. So there's that. The other thing is, when I did this, I looked along the neck and it looked like I had a slight back bow had developed in the neck, so it was curving this way. A tiny bit, mainly sort of this section here. Anyway, now that I've got this on, it has, I think, slightly straightened it. Probably looks pretty straight to you anyway, on there. But that could be because the fretboard's hardwood and is fairly rigid. That might have helped a little bit. So when I push this towards your end of the fretboard, I have a gap at this end from about like there to there, and at this end from about there to there. The rest of it, the middle section is piercing pretty level. When I go to sort of the centre of the fretboard, run this along the centre, about from here to here I've got a gap, pretty big gap at this end as well, maybe about 1 mil. At this end I've got a little gap from about there to there. Over here, this end's actually pretty good. It's good all the way up to about here. And it drops away again, once again, maybe 1 mil, 1.5 mil at the very end, top end of the fretboard. Could we get away with that with a fret job? I don't know. I guess you've got a few chances, haven't you? You've got this, you've got a truss rod, and you've got the frets you can ultimately work on as well. Anyway, let's see how we go with this. I'm using 120 grit, pretty soft paper. This is really irritating me. It's kind of in the way, but I don't really have another way of holding it down at the moment. I have a wooden block just here under the neck to try and spread the weight a little bit. Don't know if I'm keeping this straight. I probably should be making sure that I'm doing this straight and not trying to go too fast, but just go straight. Oh shit, it's starting to rain. Bloody weather. Alright. Sorry about the lighting. Started raining again. I've got a couple of drops on this. I just left it for a while so it can dry. And I'm going to get started again. Basically using the, this is a 14-inch radius block, so I've got the 14-inch guide here. It's not too bad up this end, but it's got a fair way to go up here. Currently I'm looking here, I haven't really touched the centre with the sandpaper yet, so I've got a fair way to go down yet. Anyway, I've worked out a technique. I wanted to make sure I had this in the centre. I was doing this, I was wondering I might be sort of wobbling. So I'm putting my hands on either side and just basically touching my fingernails on the sides, not so much down the bottom here, but at this end my fingers are kind of touching the sides. Hopefully I don't get splinters, but just make sure that I'm going fairly straight with it. I hope it looks like I'm going straight in the video and I'm not actually all over the joint. But this seems to be an okay way of doing it. Although my work table kind of wants to move around everywhere. I wish I had a stable workbench, but anyway, we've got what we've got at the moment. I'll come back when I'm getting somewhere. I've been focusing, I sanded it all till it was not nice and smooth, and it was about coming up pretty good with my 14 gauge here, because it's a 14 block, 14-inch radius. And then I've been focusing on this middle section here to try and get rid of the, it was diving away at this end and diving away at this end. And I think this end it was diving away because the neck has a bit of backbone. So now I've got this so that really it doesn't leave the level here. I put my level in the middle here. It doesn't really leave until it gets to about the second fret position, and it dives away a little bit. And at the end though, it's like tiny amount. It's maybe 1/3 of a millimetre, if that. Most of it's gone by the time you get to the first fret, and then it's maybe just a tiny bit of light you can see coming through. By the second fret it's gone. On this end it's only for about this far at the edge of the fretboard that you can see any light at all. I'm actually not going to worry about that because I don't mind if it dives away a little bit at that end, because from my understanding you want that end to be slightly lower anyway to reduce the chance of buzzing. So that I'm not worried about that end at all. So this end I'm going to continue sanding from about here up to the end here, a bit more, focus on that a bit more, and then at the end I'll just go for the whole thing just to make sure it's sort of smooth and consistent. This is coming up very smooth, this hardwood. This is either one of 3 species. It's a eucalypt, but it could be mountain ash, it could be Victorian ash, it could be stringy bark, because Bunnings Timber uses all 3 and they call it Tasmanian oak. It's not oak, of course, but that's what they call it. But it could be any one of those 3 species of tree. But it's quite a stringy timber, but it's quite good once you smooth it out. It is very smooth. However, I'm not sure with inlays, because it's stringy. I think it'll be really hard to do inlays because it'll chip out in line with the grain. Or like this is the kind of timber, if you pull a thread of it and pull it, it'll pull up a whole line. So I think I'm just going to do dot inlays on this or something not complicated. I'm not sure yet. Anyway, back to sanding. So I've checked with the level on here, and it's pretty good now. It's only a tiny bit here at the end now that drops away at all, and I think it's pretty much gone by the first fret. So I think we should be right, and the frets will be able to soak up the rest of it, a fret job. Learnings from this, I'm using 120 grit. I think I would start with 80 grit next time if I have to do this, so that I can get the bulk of the work done at 80 grit, because this has been taking a long time. With 120 grit, it's just takes too long. The other one I think is this bit of diving away here on the edges, where if I check, this is the 14, yep. So if I check with this, I'm still getting that bit of diving away at the edges here. It's not so bad up this end. I think partially it's, yes, the grain isn't supported on the edge, so it gets taken off more quickly, but I think it's also that if I don't push this dead straight, so if I'm pushing this along here, and I slightly tilt, like, you know, just a tiny bit, tilt that way and that way, which I do when I'm moving. I know I move a little bit as I push and pull, then any little twist is going to affect the edges more than the middle. It's going to like take the edges off. So I think that's part of it too. So to finish this up, I'm going to do 100 passes really slowly. It's going to take a long time. I'm going to do 100 passes really slowly just to make sure that I'm keeping it straight to do my finish sanding on it. So I'll just do some of it. I won't make you watch all of it, but just so you know how I'm doing it, I'm going to do it like this now. I'm going to do the whole length now because it's the final sand. Trying to concentrate, keeping it straight. My mind wants to wander though. Anyway, I'm going to do that 100 times. Okay, disaster. I was halfway through that 100 strokes I just said I was going to do. So I'd done a 50, and it was getting a bit hard to push, and it felt a bit gritty in what was going on, and I've looked and I've hit a bad bit of timber. I don't know if you can see it, but along the centre, almost the entire length of the fretboard, it's not on the very, oh no it is, it's all the way through. Right along the centre here, there's a channel in the timber, like it's a weak bit or something, and it's just ripped out. And it dints, basically. Maybe this angle will show it better. This is it here, I'm running my finger on top of it now. Mate, I'll try and show you from the other angle maybe. Yeah, here. So that's actually put a divot in it. So I'll have to sand like bugger in there to get that down. It's actually going to be a lot of sanding. So I think I will switch to an 80 grit to try and sand through it. If I can't sand through it, I'll have to rip this off and make another fretboard from scratch. Yay! Alright. Hello. So I'm pretty sure that in the last video I said I was going to use 80 grit. Turns out I didn't have 80 grit, I've got 60 grit. So it's just pretty rough stuff. Should make fairly short work of this. So we'll get rid of this channel we've got in the middle. Hopefully we don't come across any other faults in the fretboard timber, and then I'll switch to the 120 to finish it off. Let's see how quick this is. So after the bad luck we had with the fretboard having that bad bit of timber in the middle of it, we actually had some good luck. I used the 60 grit paper and got it down, and actually turned out to be really good. It actually leveled the thing out a lot more. So now the whole fretboard's almost dead level. It's just a tiny bit on the end, but it's like just this tiny slither of light coming through on this end, right near the end, and by the first fret it'll be completely gone. And this end is just about that much at the body end, where it's also just a slither of light. So it's pretty much spot on flat now. So that was a bonus. So it's probably almost worth doing it just for that anyway. I've gone over it again now with 120 and it started to smooth out. I noticed that on the paper, I'm getting a few of these bits here. You can see, like, I'm been getting a bit of a piece of wire and just knocking them off when they appear on it. It didn't show up so much with the 60 grit, but with the 120 it does. And I think what's happening is it's pulling off pieces of timber instead of just sanding about. It's actually pulling off little bits, and they're getting stuck in the paper, and I have to break them up. So I think that this timber is a little bit. I think I mentioned it was a bit of a stringy timber. I'll take you over and we'll have a look. Yeah, I think I mentioned that this timber was a bit sort of stringy. Which would be okay if it is stringy bark. It might be stringy bark. So it seems to, like, just sometimes the paper will just pull out a little piece and it gets stuck in the paper. So yeah, I think that's an issue. Also, if you look here on the end here, I don't know if you can see it, but right there we've got a bit of a rough edge where maybe I've just sort of hit the paper a little bit, or it could be just the paper is coming this way and just ripping out little bits of the timber instead of just sanding it. It's actually tearing out here, because I think the same thing has happened at this end, but it's not as bad. Yeah, it's quite it feels rough to the finger on this end, but it's not, like, it's only at the very end here it feels a little rough, but here you can see it diving away, and it's even a different color, I think, if you can see it there. So yeah, but the rest of it is quite flat, quite smooth. It's not a gappy timber. It does feel quite solid and smooth. I don't think I'll be using this on the actual build, this timber, though. I've got some nice timber I just picked up, some spotted gum, which I want to use because it's brown and grey. I'll probably use that on the actual guitar. But for this one, this was okay.
Thank you for watching today's episode. I hope you liked it, and if you did, please consider giving it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more, subscribe.